Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends, where truth matters. Good to see you once again. I know this is a second time today. I feel like I might need to have a network of my own where I can just spend the entire day just talking to the community about what's going on around the world. So that would be nice. Anyway, very, very excited to be with you. Even though I am not too excited about the nature of the topic, it's very sad. The fact that Canada has been contributing to the what's going on in Gaza as far as supporting the genocide that is taking place. Yeah, Canada is. Don't get me wrong. I'll start with my own country first, which, by the way, my country is the one enabling all this together. So, uh, we all know where the US is, and this is why it has no moral authority whatsoever to speak about human rights and freedoms and all that nonsense stuff. You know, Canada caught with its own hand in the cookie jar, as the saying goes, because Canada, as you may know, was always known to be a little bit on the peaceful side, but not on this. It's very, very disturbing what I'm going to be sharing with you. So before I do this, let me say hi to our wonderful community, which, by the way, we do have a lot of viewers from Canada. So I don't know if Canadians are aware of what's going on or not. But anyway, we'll go from there. Hera to Savinian. Sorry if I mispronounce it. Good to see you. Willie Holman. Superb. Good to see you. You wrote, I think it's safe to say Five Eyes Alliance countries are mostly all secret and complicit partners in the crime in Gaza. I agree with you. I agree with you. Abdul Fal, good to see you. Matt Becky, as always. Irene Z, salam to you as well. You can hear me? Can you guys hear me? Salam is saying, I can hear. If you guys can hear me, give me thumbs up, please. I want to make sure before we move an inch here. Yeah, Taiwan still, yeah. Okay. I am waiting for a confirmation from you guys. If sound is fine, Matt Becky, perfect. So it was just the person's personal computer, most likely. Sang Tang, good to see you. Anthony Ryder, good to see you. Rampel So One, Taiwan still, as always. Jay Khan, Jacinta, good to see you. Oh my gosh, look at guys where Jacinta joining us from. Fiji. Oh my gosh, good to have you here in the community. So, Paul, good to see you as always. And who else is here? Chris H, good to see you. And CJ and Cambridge Business, good to see you. All right, guys, let me start first of all with some housekeeping stuff. Pardon me. On Friday, I will be doing an analysis for you regarding which countries are really considering breaking sort of the taboo or acquiring a nuclear deterrence. So there are a few countries, but I have in mind three specific ones, and I'm going to share my analysis with you about that. Second thing is regarding my guests. I will have a guest next week. I am going to be working out on the detail as far as the timing. I'll share the name with you. Is Dr. Pasto. Very, very interesting individual. First time on the channel here as professor of science, technology, and national security policy. What's interesting about this gentleman is that his specialty is missiles. So he's a physicist. So and from MIT. So we'll be talking to him next week. So I look forward to that conversation. So, all right, let's get into our topic. Canada engages in a systematic deception. That's what it is. Because basically what it is, this deception is to conceal sort of the massive amount of weapons they've been sending, the arms flow to Israel in part of the ongoing genocide, which basically Canada is contributing to that. Don't get me wrong, the US is doing it, France is doing it, UK is doing it, Germany is doing it. Don't fall for it. All I'm saying is now for Canada, it caught with its hand in the cookie jar. So And that goes back to the point earlier from one of our viewers in the chat room regarding the Five Eyes. What is the Five Eyes? Well, usually this is an Anglo-sphere of intelligence alliance, basically. That includes Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and of course the US. So, and what they have, well, these countries sort of, they are party to a multilateral agreement, that is, by which they have a joint cooperation into the signal intelligence. I was a second in the military, my MOS back in the day. So the signal intelligence, that's among those 5 countries. So now when it's coming up to the surface that Canada it's been partaking into this genocide, it raised the question of the morality when Canada screamed bloody loud about the freedoms, about human rights, and yet doing the opposite. This is again what's disturbing about the West across the board. And by the way, we're not going to just judge here Mr. Carney, the new PM. That goes before him for the idiot Trudeau, which we all know what he did to Canada. I mean, Carney, he shouldn't be off the hook either, because he continued this particular policy. So, and this is why when you think about the Canadian arm exports, as I said, it continues to flow. And I'm going to share with you later on as we move forward the detail of what's involved in this. That's what I was digging into for the last 48 hours. So suffice it to say for now is that this weapon flow is part of the ongoing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza Strip. Straightforward. So, and this is, here is where the problem, and I don't know if Canadians know it or not. This is despite the ongoing and repeated claim by the government, Canadian government in Ottawa, that it has stopped supplying Tel Aviv with weapons. So what a government does versus what it does, what a government says versus what it does. Once again, it's no different than our government, which has blood on its hand. You know, I'm not denying this. And so I will do a video for you just about the US rolling into all this. But again, this is not new to you, because we all know the dark history of the United States when it comes down to other global conflicts. So, and this is part of where now you think about what the Canadians are going to go about. There are now some voices coming out, sort of social entities, a social society, for example, movements. They're explaining that Canada is using new tools sort of to keep shipping those weapons. But also those organizations, they are also using tools to track these Canadian arms exports. So I'm going to share a clip with you guys, if you allow me here. Then we'll go from there. So let me share the screen. We'll take a listen to this, and I'll continue. And those are some sort of activists in Canada that they are pushing against what Carney's government is doing. Of course, they have to do it because of the US pressure.
Demand of our advocacy, and since the beginning of this genocide, there has been one clear and urgent demand for the Canadian government to impose a comprehensive two-way arms embargo on Israel. This call has been amplified by the Arms Embargo Now Coalition, an alliance of over 450 organizations representing millions of people, including major public sector unions, faith institutions, human rights and advocacy groups, and Palestinian-led organizations. Despite this overwhelming public pressure, and despite polling data showing that a majority of Canadians support the demand for an arms embargo, the Canadian government.
Wow. Okay, let me hold on a second here, guys. Probably just some, it says here, I don't know why the all of a sudden stopped, but so
Government
yeah, I'm getting it back here, guys. There we go.
has chosen instead to lie about the nature of Canada's arms trade with Israel. In the past 2 years, Canadian politicians have deliberately misled the public into thinking that our material support for this genocide is insignificant, if not absent. But is transparency not a core value of democracy? The government's lack of transparency and dishonesty ends today as we release a new report authored by the Palestinian Youth Movement, World Beyond War, and the Arms Embargo Now coalition. This report lays bare, without a doubt, the true extent of Canada's ongoing material support for Israel amidst this genocide. It illustrates that despite deceptive government statements, the flow of military cargo from Canada to Israel has been uninterrupted. While thousands of Canadians marched right here on Parliament Hill during April's federal election, demanding an arms embargo, a shipment containing 175,000 bullets made its way from Canada to Israel. While Canadians called for an end to arms transfers, military cargo, the very tools of this genocide, were being loaded onto commercial passenger planes, flying alongside regular citizens going on holidays and visiting loved ones. This is the shocking reality that the Canadian government has tried to hide. Today's report places the Canadian government at a crossroads, as it must now choose: will it continue to arm Israel and mislead the public with vague statements about permit regulations, or will it choose a new path of transparency and heed to the demands of the people by implementing a comprehensive two-way arms embargo to stop the flow of weapons to Israel?
All right, guys, I just want you to hit it directly. So I have my doubts. I have my doubts because when you look at this whole Western notion of standing up for the rule of law, it just now it exposed as a lie. It has been always a lie. So when you look at even the ICC itself, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, that is still holding or not stating publicly about what's going, the ruling on genocide, that tells me the story right there. And I'm going to be reaching out to an international lawyer that I know and see if he's available to come to share some knowledge with you guys, with the community rather, regarding this particular issue. So for Canada, I'm not surprised at all, but what they say versus what they do is always the difference. And by the way, guys, in this I'm going to be doing geography and I'm going to be doing a little history as well. As a matter of fact, we're going to get into geography briefly here. Let me share the map with you because it's always important to know geographically where a country is located. I know some of you know where Canada is, but again, I don't like to assume. Then it's also nice to do a history to put things in perspective, given the dark history of Canada when it comes down to its indigenous people. So I'm gonna start with the geography right here. So what you're looking at is the Canada, the map of Canada, which is the largest, of course, country in North America. Canada, if you noticed on the map, as you noticed on the map, is bordered by non-contiguous, which means basically non-contiguous word means that it does not connect or share a border. Basically, that's all it says there. Contiguous U.S. state of Alaska in the northwest, and by about 12 other U.S. states in the south. So the border of Canada with the U.S. is the longest binational land border in the world. Canada is also bound by the Arctic Ocean to the north, by the Atlantic Ocean to the east, and the Pacific Ocean to the west. Canada also shares maritime borders with the islands of Greenland in the northeast and the French island regions of Saint-Pierre and Miquelon in the southeast. Very, very interesting dynamic when you look at the whole map of Canada where that is. So, regarding the history, which is very important to understand. First of all, before I'll delve deeper into this one, First thing that comes to mind has to do with the sovereignty of Canada. Is Canada a sovereign state? You know what I mean by this, right? I am referring to the Commonwealth of Nations, because when you think a Commonwealth realm is a sovereign state in the Commonwealth nation that has the same constitutional monarch and a head of state as the other realms. In a simple language, guys, that means the monarch of whatever this country is, he is the figurehead, or he is the head of that particular entity in whatever country is. In this case, Canada and Australia. So when you think about England, because the current king, Charles, that is, because except for the United Kingdom, for Britain, that is, which is in each of the realms, or rather, the monarch, here is where it's dicey. The monarch is represented by a governor general. So, and the phrase of Commonwealth realm is an sort of an informal description that those countries like England, they don't use it in their laws, not used in any law, yet it exists. So when you think about it, as of 2025, this year, so, and I looked into this one here, guys, there are 15 Commonwealth realms that still exist. Antigua and Barbuda, Australia, the Bahamas, Belize, Canada, Grenada, Jamaica, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines, Solomon Islands, Tuvalu, and the United Kingdom. So that just makes me wonder, because while the Commonwealth has about 56 independent member states, out of all those, 15, listen carefully, 15 of those 56 independent member states still have Charles, the King of England, as a head of state. What a joke. A joke and pathetic. That just shows, in the case of Canada and Australia, they have no sovereignty whatsoever. Liking this video so far? Don't just be a watcher. Go ahead and hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And don't forget to tap the bell so you will not miss any of my videos or live streams. This way, you will be supporting a channel that stands for the truth and objective reporting. The choice is yours. Thanks for your support. Indeed, thank you guys for your support. I really appreciate it. And if, once again, this is your first time here, I will greatly appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel. So let's talk briefly about the history, and I'll dive into what's going on with Canada's shipments of weapons partaking in the genocide in Gaza. So the history of Canada, and once again, guys, let's hold our judgments here. We're just providing the facts as they are, because remember, my country also has a dark history when it comes down to the indigenous people here. Even with the African Americans, if you only know the history back in the 60s and 70s. So let's refrain from judgment here, but that's what we do in this community, guys. We exchange ideas, we put the facts on the table, and we reach our own conclusions. So I'm going to start first with the indigenous people. And the indigenous people in reference to the First Nations. What am I referring to? Two entities, the Inuit and the Métis. The Inuit and the Métis people. Funny enough that the Inuits also in Greenland. So make the connection, get there, guys. Those people have inhabited Canada for thousands of years, developing their own culture and their own societies. So till the European exploration and colonization started. And this one started in, does anybody know which century the European explorer reached Canada? If you happen to know, just share it on the chat box rather. So, oh, Irene, I saw your, thank you very much. You're most welcome. You're most welcome. So, yeah, Here, Lukel, good to see you, man. All right, Zaoyan, 15th century, you're close. It was about 16th century. 16, guys. That's when the historical record showed. So the European explorer, primarily, they were two in Europe. Once again, can you guess which two countries? And remember, 16th century. What are those two countries from Europe that landed in Canada? Two countries. And remember, 16th century. It should give you an idea about Spain and Italy. No, good try, good try. Hong Kong, England and Hong Kong. Where you are? Where are you? And Spain, no. No, who got it? Oh, Lokim, you got it. It was France and UK. Zoyam, you got it. France and UK. Jorge Ruiz, you got it. France and UK. Those two. So, and here is how it happens. With with France being there, French colonization led to the establishment of so-called New France. This is why you have Quebec. They speak French. I lived in Canada back in the late 80s, briefly for about a year and a half to 2 years. So, and they speak French over there. So, and that included the colony of Canada at the time, which encompassed a vast territory along the St. Lawrence River all the way to the Great Lakes. So St. Lawrence and the Great Lakes, all that region was under the French. Then comes the British acquisition, which following, by the way, it came after various conflicts that took place. So what happened? Conflicts between whom? Conflicts between France and UK. So France ceded most of its Northern American possessions to Great Britain in 1763. This is why you need to understand the imperialism at that time, the colonizer, mainly France and UK, but of course it was the Dutch and the Portuguese prior to that. So then what happened after this came the division and the unification. Both happened. So what happened? The British, or Britain that is, divided the former New France into Upper and a Lower Canada. Same thing they did in Malaysia. Remember when I did the history of that? Same thing, they divided. So, which were later united as the province of Canada. So, and right after that, fast forward to about 1880, 1890, somewhere around that time. So what happened? The British North America Act, because it was an act that was established by the Britain at the time. What did it consist of? It consists of uniting 3 colonies: Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and the province of Canada. So, and all of them will fall under what was called at that time the Dominion of Canada. So, and that's in itself, after that, paved the way for gradual autonomy. And that autonomy took place while the Confederation granted Canada self-governance. It remained part of the British Empire till today. I will see, even though you hear Canada is independent, no. Australia is independent, no. New Zealand, no. They're still with Britain, with the UK controlling foreign affairs and defense. Even though the historical record said till later on the kind of stopped doing that, but no, they're still influencing one way or another. Then the full independence, excuse me, full independence took place, and that's when Canada took the first steps regarding this endeavor, culminating into what's known as the Statute of Westminster, or Westminster. And that one took place in 1931, and the partition of its constitution in 1982. So then, of course, modern day Canada, today Canada is called fully independent. I still have a doubt about that one. Sovereign nation. This is what the record is saying. So you can just see, while remaining a member of the Commonwealth of Nations. Remember what I said earlier? Out of the 56 out of the 56 nation or independent so-called in the Commonwealth, 15 still view Charles as the head of state. So this is what's important just to understand at least. Then comes the dark history. And this dark history, guys, which I am going to share, I was aware of it back a few years ago, especially when information came out in 2021 regarding the mass graves that were found. Once again, guys, let's not jump to judgment here, because as I said, we in the US, we have a very dark history when it comes down to the indigenous people here and the African American. And what we have done to the landowners, the Indians, is horrific what the governments did. This is why I always argue in America, you know, you hear somebody, well, you are not American, get out of here. It's like, hold on a second, man. Where do you come from? You know, I remember when I was teaching at the university, I will ask, especially when I deal with the government policies and so forth, I always start with one question. And I'll ask my students, and I say, guys, who's American here? Everybody raises his or her hand. And they look at me like perplexed, confused. Why is Dr. O asking these questions? That's how I usually lay out to them the history of how America moved into where we are today, not in a peaceful way. And finally, they will get it by the end of the semester. See, now we know, Dr. O, why you asked the question at the beginning of the semester. Same thing here. So, now, let's talk about the cultural genocide in Canada. And this one, of course, started with the shameful history of Canada's residential schools. As I said, it was in May 2021. It was a big and breaking news in Canada, actually around the world for that matter. And once again, we're not judging Canadian people. Remember, it was the government got involved in all this. So, and that's why even Canadians themselves, they were shocked at the discovery of the remains of about 215 children at the site of a former schools in British Columbia. That's where it was. So, and the bodies belong to the indigenous children, some believed to be as young as 3 years old. So, and this is, again, it is a reason why I'm bringing this to you guys. I'm bringing this to tie it to our topic regarding the shipment of weapons to be used in Gaza, because some of the dead people in Gaza are little kids that they can defend themselves. So Canada did this back then, as young as 3 years old. And this is why, because those kids went through Canada state-sponsored residential school system. I pulled out some pictures from the archives just to share some with you. So, and what was the aim for that? So, because of course the schools weren't just located in British Columbia, they were scattered across Canada. And what was the purpose for that? Was one particular objective, and that objective was to eradicate. It's the same thing we are seeing in Gaza. That's what I'm saying. Shame on Canada, and shame, of course, on my country and others, but we're not talking now about Canada. Eradicates, because what Canadian government wanted to do back then was to eradicate the culture and a language of the country's indigenous population. Is the same scenario that we are seeing today in Gaza. So, of course, the finding of this back in 2021 sort of have brought the entire world renewed attention to this shameful chapter of Canadian history, because it has left some deep wounds in hundreds of communities across Canada, which, by the way, they were demanding justice and held in whomever has to be held accountable. And that's my point in all this. So when you go through all this, and I'm going to share a link with you later on, guys, because you need to see as to what really took place. Because those residential schools were there for a specific reason. Interesting enough is that the Canadian Constitution also recognizes now the métis, which means, by the way, mixed. That's the meaning of the word. Descendant of the union between the First Nation people and the European, and that's between the 17th and the 19th century. Even in the Constitution. And the Inuit, remember, as I told you, there were two, the Inuit and the Métis. The Inuit people, whose territories consisted of about, according to historical record, 51 communities inhabited the Arctic region, are the smallest groups recognized by the government, the Canadian government, that is. So, and that is where that dark history of Canada comes in. And it's, again, we are not judging here. It just, I feel you need to know what was going on in this. This is the indigenous with the rifles, because they were all indoctrinated into some sort of a military aspects of it. So, and of course, we are not going to ignore the abuses of the Catholic Church that took place in Canada. And by the way, once again, my respect to religious people and my respect to those who practice Catholicism, because we are not judging the faith itself. It's because it's the same problem. The child abuse or sexual abuse that took place in the Catholic Church happens also in other religions. Let's make that clear. Let me make that clear to you. We're not just pointing fingers at the Catholics. All I need to do is share the knowledge with you, and you guys reach your own conclusion. I'm not going to do that for you here. So now let's go back to our conversation about the shipments of these weapons. So, and why the report used the term, and I am using that term, putting it in quote, using the term systematic deception, which means what? It means that it was crafted strategy, well-intentioned, for the intention of deceiving the Canadian people. That is the word, systematic deception. So, because what the Canadian government wants to do, it was to conceal this massive and ongoing flow of the Canadian arms directly to Israel. And here's the problem. We have the same here. Despite the statements by the senior Canadian officials confirming, we stopped supplying Canada, as supplying Israel. By the way, some of that weapon that was shipped was coming through U.S. firms. So this way, Canada is washing its hand of that, but sending it through the U.S. Because we all know it's the U.S. that is providing all the weapons and enabling what's going on in Gaza. As a matter of fact, they are now, you hear Britain calling, we're going to recognize the state of Palestine unless Israel stops his fire. Did you see how they put the condition there? So that means there was never an intention to recognize the Palestinian state if it wasn't for this. Even France is saying we're going to recognize, and the US is saying forget about it. That shows you where things are. All this is nothing but hypes. Here, because if you really want to solve this, find out which country in the world wants to send its own army and military and go over there and stop this genocide. Because that's where you truly find out who really wants to stop this and who is just giving a lip service. Because like I always say, this is how leadership is tested. It's not in photo apps or statements. It's in action. Yeah. See around the world who is willing to send its troops to stop this genocide one way or another. Otherwise, it's not going to stop. So, and this is where We are finding out now that the consistent patterns of lies coming out of Ottawa. So, while at the same time, Canadian people are struggling to make ends meet, if you guys only know, and for my Canadian viewers, if you happen to be here in the chat room with you, or chat box, that is, please share with the community the prices of housing in Canada, how expensive has become. Instead of, we all remember what dictator Trudeau did during the COVID time. You all remember? You know, you can't forget what the dictator did in the name of safety, in the name of freedom. You know, Carney is no different. Like the saying goes, meet the new boss as the old boss. They both cut from the same cloth. There were demonstrations in I believe some of them took place in, if I'm not mistaken, British Columbia, if I'm not mistaken, in Edmonton, Alberta. I'm sorry. And by the way, I give credit of this picture to Arthur Vidak. So, and this, by the way, took place in recently, those demonstrations in Canada. So, it's because the cost of living in Canada is getting way out of control, while the government still wasting tax dollars is no different than what we have here. And let alone Canada now, as of the August 1st, they're going to be paying 35% in taxes, in tariffs from the US. This tells you where things are. So let me share with you the numbers of what was going on, because I'm going to keep this brief here, guys. The results are based on a commercial shipping data. As a result, and I'm going to provide you the link, by the way, because all these weapons, multiple shipments, were sent to one specific company in Israel, and that's called the Elbit Systems. I got a picture of them. All right. I thought I did. Yeah, right here. Elbit System. This is the one that's been receiving the weapons and ammos and all that stuff in Israel. So Canada is kind of, you know, to me that becomes clear. It is contributing to the genocide, whether they want to admit it or not. So here is what the data shows as far as the shipments going to Elbit System company, which is an Israeli one that deals with providing this to the military, Israeli IDF. So first, 47 shipments of military components were sent to Israeli arms companies, according to detailed commercial shipping data disclosed by the Canadian companies, because they have to disclose that. You can't just cross borders with whatever. 421,000 bullets have been sent to Israelis since the start of the war on Gaza, including on April of this year, 2025, shipments that contained about 175,000 bullets alone. 3 shipments of cartridges were sent to Israel from JD OTS facility in Remaking, which is in Quebec, Canada. And that one, it includes 1 shipment just sent 9 days after the then Canada Foreign Minister pledged to halt ammunition exports from the company to the Israeli military. Like I always say, the damn politicians, this saying one thing and doing the opposite. 391 shipments includes bullets, military equipment, weapon parts, aircraft components, and communication equipment were sent from Canada to Israel, according to Israeli tax authority data that documents only a portion of the total exports. Next one, approximately 100 international flights carried Canadian components to Israel, including 64 passenger flights in which military cargo was loaded under passenger seats to destination including Frankfurt, Paris, New York, Abu Dhabi, and New Delhi. So, and this is where that clip I shared with you for the Ban Arms Now coalition, we're trying to really expose what is going on. So, and this is, they are trying to sort of, for example, put forth recommendations like the Canadian Foreign Ministry should urgently use Canada Special Economic Measure Act to stop. They're not going to do it. They are not going to do it. It's because Canada is not a sovereign state as you might think. And do you know what they are getting into? You all remember when dictator Trudeau was giving some talks in the Canadian Parliament, and they did a standing ovation for a Nazi that was from Ukraine fled to Canada? You all remember that history? So, oh, this is part of the history of the Catholic Church abuse in Canada. So those are demonstrations in Canada. So makes you just wonder, is really Canada standing for what it used to be? Not anymore. Canada, the way I used to know, is gone, long gone. So, and they have to just now bow to what the U.S. is saying, because all this is under the authority of the U.S. Because remember, you all remember, guys, One Man Joe, the CFO of Huawei, was detained in Canada after the U.S. gave the order to Canadians to arrest her. It was an illegal arrest, illegal, and yet Canada had no choice but to bow to Americans. I had a chance to read the at that time, because it's declassified now. The declassified. Back then, it was still would not be released to the people. It was a letter from the White House to the Canadian Prime Minister's office. So it's the same here, guys. We're not going to see any difference. We're not going to see any difference. And the same arguments I've made about Australia, New Zealand, and even the Philippines. If we only know what the U.S. the plans U.S. has for the Philippines. This is why I believe maybe Filipinos needs really to make a decision as to where they want their country to go. And same argument will be made for the Canadian as well. For us Americans, we are so oblivious to what's going on. We're brainwashed. You have Americans that they can't even know what is going on, let alone our tax dollars are being wasted and all. So it's the choice we make as far as who we vote for. There should be a law, in my opinion. It should be a law on the books that I don't care if you just being voted to office. If you break your promise, you're out. Doesn't matter whether you spend 1 week or you spend a year or 5 years. This shouldn't be wait till your term is over. No, get him out or get her out and investigate. And if the people get involved in corruption, do exactly like what the Chinese are doing. You put the guy in jail for the next 30 years. For me, I won't put them in jail. I'll take care of it the next day. You all know what I mean? And I know some might think I'm this heartless guy. No, I'm not. I'm being realistic. So, in any event, that's all I have to share with you guys on this segment here. I hope you enjoyed listening to this truth revealing info about so-called the esteemed Canada. Canada is gone. So Canada is gone. So remember to join me tomorrow on the big channel on Geopolitics and Money. We'll be talking about the US and Europe and the taxes, the tariffs. Europeans are holding the end of the stick. They're going to be paying 10 times the price for energy that they're going to be importing from the US. That's stupidity or what? So in any event, we'll be talking about that tomorrow. And on Friday, I will be working, as I said, on the story for you regarding the countries that are considering going on a nuclear path. So I want to share the link with you for those who wants to support my upcoming trip to Asia. Thank you so much already for those who have already donated in support of this endeavor. And I'm also going to share the link with you for the channel if you want to support the channel, should you decide to do that. And I put it in the chat box for you guys. And the last thing is, I don't know if I told you about my speaking engagements. I'm going to share a link with you to those whom you never know. You never know. You might know someone who might need somebody, a geopolitical strategist. I'll be happy to do a presentation for that particular entity, whatever that might be. So for my books, guys, if you are interested in purchasing copies of my books, as you know, I wrote a few books about West Asia. That includes American foreign policy, that includes Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. And I am in the process of writing about China. I didn't forget that. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing you next time. As always, remember, geopolitics impacted daily life in more ways than one. Till next time. Bye-bye.